6 years have passed since the snow swallowed her name, since the mountain kept its secret, and silence stood where love once lived. Yet in the pulse of winter, something stirs. A shadow limps across the ridge, blood in its trail, fire in its eyes, not from fear, but from remembering there was once a hand that fed her, a voice that spoke not in commands but in trust, and that voice even now lives in the spaces between her pain. Every breath a memory, every step a promise she never chose to forget, and neither did the one who waits below her hands, calloused by time, her heart hollowed by loss. Yet when their eyes meet across the wire of fate, there is no doubt, only the tremble of something ancient breaking open. Not even time can kill what was real. Not silence, not distance, not even the years that buried it. The wild returns, not alone, but bearing something that will change everything. And with it comes the question that haunts them both. Can something once broken still know the shape of home? Each morning, Eleanor walked the perimeter of the sanctuary before the sun touched the trees, her boots sinking into familiar earth, her fingers trailing the wire fence as if feeling for something lost in the static of memory. She fed the animals in silence, not because it was easier, but because words had become thin, useless things since the day the leash slipped from her hand and the forest closed behind it. Her cabin was lined with sketches. Most unfinished outlines of a feline shape she could never quite get right. The kettle boiled at the same time every evening, but she no longer noticed the taste of tea, her eyes always drifting to the ridge where mist curled like a beckoning hand. Some nights she would wake and swear. She'd heard breathing that wasn't her own, soft, rhythmic, wild. She kept a blanket folded by the door, though no one ever came, and a collar she never threw away. The world had moved on around her. The radio spoke in cheerful voices. The sanctuary grew in visitors, but inside her there was a room locked, tight where winter never left, and something with pale eyes still waited for the sound of returning paws. It happened in a breath, the kind of moment that doesn't scream but shatters quietly. 1 second the leash was firm in Eleanor's hand. The next it was air, weightless and useless. The harness twisted, the sound of claws on gravel, a blur through the trees. Then nothing, no roar, no cry, just absence. So sudden it felt like waking from a dream. You didn't know you were in. She ran. She called until her voice broke against the trees, but the forest only listened. It never answered. Days became weeks. Maps worn soft with fingers. Every possible trail walked until her legs refused. And still nothing. No prints, no remains. Just silence, the kind that hums in the bones. Ashra was gone, and with her went the color of the world. Elena stopped drawing, stopped writing the names of her animals into the daily logs. She did her work cleanly, efficiently, but something inside had curled inwards as if love itself had become too painful a thing to risk again. She laughed, less smiled, like it hurt, like it might crack her open again. She built her life around not hoping, because to hope meant remembering, and remembering meant bleeding. The sanctuary staff noticed but said nothing. They spoke to her with kindness and distance, the way people do with those who live half a breath behind time and still in the mountains somewhere. Ashra had changed too. The young cub who once slept with her paw on Elena's boot now moved with caution through a world that had proven itself unreliable. Human scent no longer meant warmth, it meant confusion, fear, the sharp sting of separation. She no longer sought closeness, only cover, only survival. And so for 5 long years they existed on opposite sides of silence, carrying the same wound, speaking the same pain, but never hearing each other, and the forest kept its secret until it no longer could. Let me pause here for a moment. And now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Have you ever experienced something like this yourself? Maybe a moment when someone, a person or even an animal, remembered you after years apart. If this story touches something in you, don't forget to follow. There's so much more ahead. Quiet, powerful stories that stay with the heart long after the words fade. It started with a photo, grainy, caught on a motion-triggered trail cam high in the mountains. a snow leopard limping through snow head low, but eyes burning. Eleanor stared at the image too long, the coffee in her hand going cold. Something in the curve of the shoulders, the tilt of the gaze. It pressed against a door she had sealed years ago. No one else saw it. They saw a wild animal. She saw a question, a ghost-shaped ache she couldn't name. And when the emergency call came days later, snow leopard, injured, found near a ravine, still breathing. Her hands moved before her mind did she drove in silence. Heart clenched between fear and something worse, hope. What if it wasn't her? What if it was, but she didn't remember what, if the past was only alive, for one of them. And as the truck climbed through the frost-covered roads, Elena remembered everything. The first feeding, the first time Ashra slept beside her, the silent trust that had grown like moss in the spaces where language couldn't go. She remembered the last look before the leash went slack, and she had lived inside that moment ever since. And now, here she was again, standing on the edge of a choice. The leopard lay quiet in the recovery pen, stitched and bruised eyes closed until they opened and locked with hers. No recognition at first, just wild pain, but then a flicker, a pause. Not fear, not instinct, something else, something searching. And when Ashra stood, despite the pain, despite the warnings, despite every reason, not to Elena's, breath caught. She didn't pace, she didn't snarl. She simply looked beyond the cage toward the ridge as if remembering something buried beneath snow and time. And Elena understood this was no random movement. This was a call, not of sound, but of memory, of something that had survived them both. And though fear gripped her, though logic begged her to let the past rest, she found herself moving toward the gate, heart pounding with every step. Because some silences are not endings. They are waiting, and something was waiting now. The forest was quiet in the way. Only snow can make it, every sound, muffled, every breath sharp and real. Elena moved behind her, slowly, boots crunching the frost. Ashra walked with effort, but with certainty. Her body bruised her, steps uneven, yet her path sure, like she was following something older than instinct. They crossed the stream where sunlight fractured through ice, and Elena remembered teaching her how to step lightly on stones. Her voice low, her hands steady. They passed. A tree marked long ago by small, unsure claws, and Ashra paused there for a moment. The scent, the bark, something in it made her still. And then she moved again, until finally she stopped beneath a fallen pine. Its branches bowed and heavy and curled in its roots, a shape, small, fragile, blinking against the cold. A cub. Elena inhaled like the breath had been stolen from her. Ashra turned her body between them, protective, but not afraid. And then she looked at Elena. Truly. Looked, eyes meeting, not with wildness, but with the slow, widening recognition of something impossible, yet undeniably real. Her body did not move. Her ears did not twitch. But her gaze softened just slightly. And Eleanor stepped closer, heart in her throat, hands trembling, unsure if she was welcome, unsure if this was only memory playing tricks. But then Ashra leaned forward, one breath too. The space between them filled with years of silence and longing, and without warning, Ashra pressed her head against Elena's chest. Not with weight, not with force, but with memory. The way she used to when she was small, when the world still made sense. And Elena broke, not loudly, but inwardly, utterly. Her arms didn't close around her. She knew better. But her hands hovered just inches from the fur, warm and coarse and real. The cub whimpered, once then curled into its mother, and for a moment nothing moved. The world held its breath, the air full of things that could never be said but no longer needed to be. Because in that press of forehead to heart, something was returned, something forgotten, remembered, and in that stillness everything changed. Not a word spoken, not a sound made, just the quiet, undeniable click of two lives finding each other again. The days moved slowly, but with purpose. Morning. Light stretched across the enclosure, where Ashra now lay, not in guarded silence but in watchful calm. Her cub nestled against her flank, tiny chest rising and falling in steady trust. Elena sat nearby, never reaching, never rushing. Just being presence had become their language again. And it was enough at first. Ashra kept her distance, her gaze wary, her body alert, but she didn't turn away. And then one afternoon, as wind whispered through the fence, Ashra stood, walked the few steps that closed the space between them, and sat not touching, but near enough that Elena could feel the warmth radiating through the cold, and something inside her softened like a frozen river beginning to move again. The cub grew playful, swatting at leaves, chasing shadows, and when Elena laughed, truly laughed, Ashra looked up and blinked. Slow, not startled but aware, almost acknowledging sound had returned. Feeling had returned once Elena left a small blanket just outside the gate, one they had used years before, and by morning, it was gone, not torn, not shredded, simply gone, taken and woven into the nest where the cub slept. A choice made in quiet trust. Days passed and routines formed again. Not like before, but better, simpler. Ashra would sometimes follow Elena along the edge of the fence, matching her steps, pausing when she paused, and one evening, just as the sun slipped beneath the trees, Elena sat, and Ashra came close enough to rest her head against the wire, only for a moment, but long enough to say, "I remember you," not in words, but in weight, in nearness, in breath. And Elena placed her hand against the same spot, her palm pressed to the space where wild and human met through metal, through memory, and in that small, unspoken exchange was all the healing. They needed. Some connections are not made. They are found uncovered again after being buried by time, pain, or distance. And when they are, they don't need explanation. They just are alive still and waiting in the quiet until someone is brave enough to listen. Some bonds are not built with words or time, but with presence, with breath shared in silence, with moments that linger long after they pass. They survive through absence, through fear, through the long, cold stretch of not knowing. And when they return, they do not ask for permission. They simply arrive soft and undeniable. Ashra did not come back the same, and neither did Elena. They met again, not where they left off, but somewhere deeper, where pain had carved room for something even more. Enduring trust, rebuilt not in leaps, but in quiet gestures. And now when Elena walks past the enclosure, there is no ache, only stillness, a kind of peace that says nothing was wasted. Not the years, not the silence, not the waiting. Because some connections never truly break. They go quiet, they go deep. But when the heart is ready, they rise again. And when they do, they don't just bring back what was lost. They bring back who we are.